What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. We're just at 50.7 volts on the TSD8 Tongsheng 750 watt mid-drive motor. I've got the open source firmware on it. I want to look at my watt meter and see what it says here. What does it say down there? It says 17.14 amps peak. It says 49.65 volts minimum, 891 watts peak on the 52 volt battery. So we're going to try out the open source firmware on the trails for the very first time. All right, here we go. So one of the reasons that I'm trying out the open source firmware is that the pedal assist is supposed to work smoother, and there's different modes that you can choose from. So I'm kind of feeling how the pedal assist works. It feels smoother. Hey there. So I noticed when I put this on the open source firmware, it seems like the top speed went down by about 10 or 15% as I was going over here. It felt like the entire time I was going like a few miles an hour slower than I was with the factory firmware. I'm interested to see how this is going to work up some of these climbs out here, because I think the factory firmware was doing a little bit more like peak watts. Definitely doesn't feel as punchy when I'm climbing either. Yeah. Huh. So I use kind of conservative values on this ride. So I think for the max power, I set it to 1100 watts. So it kind of was relatively high for this motor. 1100 watts will make this motor heat up over time. On my watt meter, it seems like it's not doing more than like 900. So, oh man, I am pedaling. I'm a little bit curious how hot it is, because I was throttling over here and then I never checked how hot the motor was. And that's usually when it gets hot, it's throttling on the streets. Yeah, it feels, I would say noticeably less powerful how I have it set up right now. I did kind of lower the settings because I didn't want to melt anything on this Maiden Voyage. I just wanted to get through a ride without having some kind of catastrophe. So let's see here. I'm curious. What's the temperature of it? That's pretty typical, I would say. It seems like it's running at a probably a cooler temperature than usual. So I think to some extent the open source firmware is a little bit slower than the factory firmware, but I also have my settings a little bit low right now, so more testing is required. One thing I also noticed was that, let's see here, I might go the other way, because it's getting darker out. I kind of want to get to the other side of the trails. We don't have much time. So far through testing this, it seems like when I give it a battery limit, oh, we got the Air 7. Alright, well that's kind of what I was hoping wouldn't happen. Okay, so what does watt meter say? It says 53.24 volt min, 891 watts peak, 4.453 amp hours. 17 amps peak. I'm gonna disconnect this battery so I reset the watt meter. Disconnect it. Okay, so this is like kind of a climb. I'm not sure. Oh my. I'm not sure if the throttle is gonna be able to get me started here. Oh, it did. There we go, nice. Well, at least that worked. So I'm kind of conflicted right now because the torque sensor does feel better, but I think I need to tweak the settings for a little bit more power. Something a little bit weird with this motor is like, sometimes when I'm riding it around on the streets, both in the factory version of it and with this, just riding here, it felt like after a while of riding it, it was just going slower. I don't know why, but it was like the closer that I got to the trails, like by the time I got here, I was going like 25 miles an hour or something. Like the battery is like fine. I don't know, kind of weird. So there have been a lot of sleepy bees lately, just everywhere. Very confused and discombobulated bees that are dangerous. So, but I do have some long pants on today, so I can just go flying through here. Get my goggles on. It does seem like if you want to use this open source firmware, the best way to do it is to buy that 860C display so that you don't have to use the Java configurator, and you can change the settings from the display and calibrate the torque sensor. And especially for debugging, like to look at the debugging values and see the torque sensor values, it was quite difficult with this EKD01 display. so might get the 860C. I'm still a bit conflicted though. I have to boost the power up in my settings, but just doesn't quite feel as powerful as the factory one. I wish Tongsheng would let you customize the factory one. And Lee from Powallon said that he was gonna try and get me a programming kit, but I don't know whatever happened with that. I've got to send Lee an email. So I used to just be able to rip up this hill when I was on a factory one. I'm not pedaling super hard right now, which might be part of it. So if you want to get a workout with the open source firmware, it's great for that, I would say. Because it feels like you gotta work a little bit harder. When I first put the open source firmware on here, I was pedaling really hard. And it seemed like I had to pedal way too hard to get it to do anything, regardless of the pedal assist level. And then I changed that ADC step to 12, and that helped. Can't see anything except for that bunny. Oh. So I think Tongsheng is slowly but surely improving the factory firmware. Because when I read the firmware for my TSDZ8 that I got from Powallon, it's probably a newer TSDZ8 kit with, you know, fairly newly manufactured TSDZ8s, I would expect. And the size of the firmware file when I read it and saved out the hex file, it was 155 kilobytes. And that was bigger than both the open source firmware hex file, and it's also bigger than like the Tongsheng factory firmware from 2024. So the size of the file since a year ago was about 50% bigger on the Tongsheng factory firmware. So I think they've probably improved it significantly. And I think I just feel like even when I turned my settings up and I had this thing doing more like 1,000 watts, I had it doing a little bit more power previously when I had the settings a little bit higher. And even when it was doing like 1,100 watts, it didn't quite feel as powerful as the factory one for some reason. So I would say it's about 10% max speed, but I don't know, it seems like the factory firmware was also doing maybe like a couple hundred watts more. Or it was just punchy or somehow it was optimized in some way. I played around with the field weakening in the OSF, and when I have it no load in the stand and I'm just giving it full throttle with the field weakening, I can't even tell if it's going any faster. So it's kind of weird. Like when you turn on field weakening and your no load speed, like the top speed should be faster, and it was like 0.1 mile an hour, maybe like 0.2 miles an hour. Like, so I don't know that the field weakening that's in this open source firmware is any good whatsoever. I think the open source firmware, or I think the factory firmware might have some kind of field weakening going, because it felt like I got a little bit more speed out of each gear somehow of the factory. I've never hit that thing before. I'm just trying to make it through here live. I've got these polarized goggles, and if I take them off, the bugs are going to hit me in the eyes. I got some hydraulic brakes I gotta put on this thing. Probably gonna slap the front one on there real quick, and then the rear one, all the internal routing and all that stuff seems like it's gonna take some work. So I noticed sometimes when I shift into a higher gear, when I'm like throttling down the street or when it's really under load, it seems like the motor goes through some kind of like shock load or something, and from switching gears, and all of a sudden it, like for a second there's no resistance, but then it slams into the next gear and it's harder to go, and I think the current spikes, and then it does the error 7. That was the first error 7 that I've got with the open source firmware after I switched it into the hybrid mode. When I was in EMTB mode, I was getting error 7s all day long for like 2 days, and I was going crazy. So EMTB mode for the TSDZ8 open source firmware needs some work. I feel like I'm going really slow. It's still fun to get out here because it's been raining for days, but I gotta figure out how to pep this thing up a little bit. I didn't leave it on like 20 something amps because I didn't want to like overheat it when I was throttling over here, but it seems like whatever limit you give it, it kind of like undershoots it. Like if you tell it 20 amps, it'll probably be doing like 18 or something. I think the max power limit you can just set to like 1100 or 1200 or something, and then just use the battery current as like the threshold, and then set a battery current that's not going to be too much for like continuously throttling on the streets. But I think I can probably do more than like, I think I use 18 or 19. I think you can probably do a few more amps with that. It kind of feels like I'm going half as fast with this, basically, though. Like I gotta figure this out. Feels a little bit slow, these settings. Oh. So it says 819 watts peak. And we've used 0.838 amp hours. We haven't even used 1 amp hour on the trail. 38.2 watt hours. 15.95 amps peak. So like 16 amps. And I think I set the limit to like 18 or 19. So I don't know if there's something funny about the firmware where it's calculating, it's like measuring the current wrong or something. But it just seems like consistently, if I set it for like 20 amps, it'll be doing like 17 or 18 max, and it undershoots it by a pretty significant amount. I think the way I have it set up right now is probably a good way, like a good way where you don't have to worry about anything going wrong, like overheating or anything. But I gotta get it set up so each of my modes kind of does like a power level that I can remember, so then I can just like, I would like to be able to change the mode down so that the throttle does less power. But the throttle that's on this thing feels so funny. The throttle that's on the TSDZ8 is without a doubt the worst throttle on any e-bike ever. And it's not even worth using. Here we go, drop her down. What's my dropper post doing? Dropper post isn't going. Can't get her down. So I'm hoping that I can get this thing shifting under load without doing all the Air 7s under all the time, because that was one thing that I liked about this Shimano Q's, is that it just shifts under load so good. So, oh man, can my dropper go down here? What's going on? Like, oh my god, it seems like the cable, oh, it did go down. Oh boy, I wonder if I'll be able to get it back up. Oh, no, we got the Air 7 right before the jump. Oh. Alright, well, I gotta redo my dropper. So, dropper up. Okay. Well, I'll spare the rock jump for another day. Oh. The pedaling definitely feels better, like when you're hitting the brakes and pedaling and hitting the brakes and pedaling, like the pedaling is more responsive and that works better. So that's a start. But I definitely think I need a little bit more power. Like, also need some better brakes. Something's going on with my Zoom X Tech, HB Tech, whatever the fuck they're called, the cable pull, hydraulic caliper brakes. Something's going on with them. Like the rear one is all greased up or something. It feels so weird. Front one is still working okay. Yeah, see, like when I'm trying to do punchy little climbs and stuff, like the peak watts is everything, and I can just tell that it's like 30, probably like 25 or 30% less peak watts. Oh, it's like a tree fell down there or something, or they chopped one down that was hanging over the trail. I still need to get my Fox factory float DPS shock on here. Trying to figure out how to get that thing on here has been so ridiculous. I don't know anything about suspension and rear shock mounting hardware and all that, and it's like not easy to figure out how to get a damn Fox shock onto this Ozark trail thing, because it's got some janky, like non-standard spacing on it. And then everybody, Seth Bike Hacks, everybody that has made a video on YouTube about putting a rear shock on the FS2 Slalom doesn't even show what they did or like which parts they used. They just kind of say, I upgraded it, check it out. And they don't tell you like how they made it happen. And even when I'm asking the AI about how to do it, it's telling me to like buy parts that don't exist, and then it'll just tell you that you suck and take it to the bike shop. It does feel like, I think on the Tongsheng one, like it would use your torque. It was kind of like a hybrid thing too, where it would use your torque, but then it feels like hybrid mode. I think it uses the torque sensor value, or it uses like the cadence, like how fast you're spinning the cranks, and it kind of uses the bigger value of the two. Or it multiplies them together or something. So it's like the power is like your torque multiplied by your cadence. And it feels pretty good for pedaling around. I just wish it was doing a little more power. This bike with this battery mounted in the front, I kind of have to pull it up, pull the front of the bike up a little bit when I'm going over things. Kind of pop it up because it's slightly front heavy. I think this Marzocchi Bomber is not the lightest fork either, but I like how it feels and how it's simple to adjust and change. Marzocchi seems like they were a good company that made good shocks. And then Fox bought them out. I don't think Fox changed a thing. So I like this Marzocchi Bomber Rail Z2 fork. Should have bought one a long time ago. So yeah, I would say that this is more of like a natural experience, but at the power levels that I have it just doesn't quite feel as punchy as I would expect. So I'm gonna have to change that. I think I have the power limit and the amps set more to like what would be appropriate for like a 500 watt motor, really. If it's only doing 900 watts. There's some 500 watt motors that do 20 amps. But yeah, that Air 7, I see it. I've seen it a couple times in the hybrid mode. And it always seems to be like when I hit a bump or something, or when I'm like going up a hill and then I switch it into a higher gear. That happens when I shift under load. So it seems like and I think it might, I don't know, like I think when you go airborne, like if the motor is still trying to spin and then all of a sudden it can just spin super fast. I don't know if that causes any problems either. It's getting kind of dark out here. I gotta get out of here. Let's see, we're gonna take this exit. I think I've seen enough. We've tested these settings enough. So it seems reliable enough to like ride around in the hybrid mode. But, so it says 74 watt hours, 15.95 amps peak, only 16 amps, 51.3 volts min. 819 watts peak, 1.626 amp hours. That's kind of weird. It only did 816 amps. Man. So this is going to be the scary part when I gotta go down this county road like 20 miles an hour. So, all right guys, well, this was the first test of the TSDZ8 open source firmware. We had it in hybrid mode. It was set to like 18 or 19 amps and 1100 watts. It was very slow and frustrating riding here. But the motor is like, it's not hot, it's not really hot at all. So it definitely seems like it can handle more than this. I think the reason why this motor has felt so hot to me is because it's kind of like smaller than a hub motor. So usually when I'm feeling a hub motor and I know the temperature is like based on hub motor feel, I think this motor is just smaller. So this motor might kind of like feel hotter on the outside than the hub motor would at like the same temperature, if that makes any sense. I hope my GoPro is going. Did we get anything here? Okay, good. I remembered to turn the GoPro on. All right, well, I'm like in this weird situation where I'm wearing something that's way too warm for riding around on the mountain bike trails. And I'm kind of good on testing this for now. So we're just gonna go throttle down the street. And I don't know what the deal is, guys, like with throttling this thing, but like it just seems slow. I don't know. So that we're gonna have to boost up the power and try to get this thing going a little bit better. Make sure you let me know in the comments if you've used the open source firmware and what settings you use and what your results have been. It's kind of weird when you're only doing 900 watts. It's like you gotta go in lower gears the whole time, or else the motor just bogs out because it's not doing as much. Oh my god, so I gotta go like 8 miles going 20 miles an hour. Oh boy. But we're definitely preserving energy, only using 900 watts. It's like the lowest energy consumption bike ride I've ever gone on. Alright, well, thanks for watching, guys. Like and subscribe, leave a comment, do all that jazz. Note to self, something just happened and I got the error 7 and I turned it back on and I got an error 2 that was like stuck there. I don't know if I was because I was holding the brakes, or if it was because I was stepping down on the torque sensor when I turned the bike on and it like, I don't know. That was weird. All these blackbirds. But yeah, that was the thing that just happened. It smells like there's a fire somewhere. It smells pretty good. Not like a bad fire, like a wholesome campfire. So I've noticed if you're throttling with this thing and then you shift into a higher gear and you're just giving it the full throttle, that is a catalyst for causing error 7 quite easily. We're in 9th gear, we're going down the hill. Let's see what this thing can do, bubs. It still got up to the max speed. Oh, we got gravel on the turn, wow. I forgot to tell you guys, I got some new grips. They're like Ergon, I think they're called GP3 mountain biking grips. Oh, we're bogging. I got a pedal. Man, it just feels like it's bogging in my top gear now compared to before. Like it felt like it was working a lot better on my 9th gear. Cruising around with the factory firmware, I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments, like and subscribe. This is going to be the actual end of the video. Later, bubs. 854 watts peak. I use 7.7 amp hours. That is insane. How 329 watt hours, 16.93 amps peak. So like 17 amps peak, 48.4 volts minimum. So it was only, I set it to do 1100 watts and it was barely doing 900 watts. But I went for a whole ride. I would say usually I use a lot more amp hours. I only use 7.7. That's crazy. That whole time. So when I got to the trail, I plugged in this battery, and then the whole ride on the trail, and then the whole ride back on the street, it was only 7 amp hours. I didn't go as far, so there is that. I suppose if I would have gone my normal ride, I still probably only would have used like 10 amp hours or something. Like, it's because I was only using 900 watts. Alright.